will commence upon Ms. Vukazi completing her testimony, and we will thereafter reconvene around 2:30 to proceed with the program.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's very nice to be in Joburg, enjoying a glass of water, and just to be in a different space and able to see different people and different people from different spaces. I can see there's TAC, Afternoon Comrades, SJC, and everyone else. I'm not really sure how much time I have. Yeah. Okay. So firstly, I want to introduce UniteBehind as a coalition that came about last year in May. So hashtag UniteBehind is a voluntarily association people's movements with legal policy and support organizations, which is advocating for justice and an equal society. Under the banner of UniteBehind, we have about 23 and plus organizations that are around Cape Town. So we came about on the day of the memorial service of the fallen leader and comrade Ahmad Kathrada, which was on the 6th of April, 2017. So we emerged. If people remember, on the same night, I stand corrected, on the same night there was a reshuffle in the country where Mr. Pravin Gordhan and Mr. Jonas, which were from the Ministry of Finance, were reshuffled on the same day of the memorial service and the day after. I don't know what's going on. It's me. Sorry. So that's when UniteBehind came about. So the main mission for UniteBehind is to build, as I said, is to build a just and an equal society where people shall share their country's wealth. So and obviously be able to participate in any decision that is being made that is going to directly affect people. So one of the things that we aim to advocate for, or we're still striving for even today, especially in the Western Cape, is to have an environment where people are able to, as I said, are able to make decisions and have access to reliable transport. So I've been introduced as someone that's going to speak on PRASA, but I'm also going to speak a bit about state capture and how PRASA is affecting our daily lives, or how the crisis at PRASA, or the fact that for the past 5 weeks in Cape Town, Northern Line and Southern Line trains have not been running. So we're aiming to build a safe, reliable, efficient, and equality public transport system, particularly, as I said before, the commuter rail service. Obviously dealing with epidemic corruption, state capture, as I said, political interference by executive, incompetence and maladministration at PRASA. But as I said before, the most important thing that we're talking about at this moment is the urgent need for people to intervene. Not just the parliament, but commuters, other provinces as well. We need to intervene and talk about the state of railway system, or the transportation mode, which is PRASA in Cape Town. So at the moment, the current issues that are facing PRASA is we can't deny the fact that we need an immediate, not an interim board, we need a board that's going to be accountable to Parliament. We need a board that we can trust, and we need a board that can bring evidence and submit this word just ran out, and basically to account. So last week on Thursday, we made a request to Parliament to give them oral submission. Last year, we compiled a document or evidence, which is PRASA leaks. So we wanted to give evidence because we have been speaking to PRASA, speaking to the Minister of Transport, sending letters and trying to actually intervene. That is before the two central lines were closed. But we haven't had that much interaction or that much feedback. And we've had protests in between. So what we need at the moment, as I said, is the PRASA board that can be able to account. And then we need a safety plan, safety emergency plan that is going to take care of the commuters. That is going to include women and children in trains, people with disability, elderly people. We need to have access to emergency when something has happened to you on the trains. At this moment, we don't have such. So that's what is an emergency at PRASA. Sometime in 2015, I think in August, the public protector, Umamu Tulimadonsela, had a report which was derailed, which on that report she specifies or she talks about the maladministration that's happening at PRASA, procurement regulations, and she also talks about the level of corruption. Within the same report, she has remedies, right? So it's one of the things that we always refer to in whatever that we do. We always refer to the report that she gave. At the time she submitted the report, PRASA had a CEO who was Mr. Lucky Montana. Within the report, Mr. Lucky Montana, Roy Moodley, and the others are implicated. So right immediately after that, Mr. Lucky Montana resigned. And then someone else came as a CEO of PRASA, Mr. Popo Molefe. So Popo Molefe replied by a letter to both the board, stating that they need to consider the derailed report, which was submitted by Mamutule Madonsela. So there was a response back saying they do acknowledge the letter, and then they will, obviously, they will be able to see or try to implement some of the remedies. So within the report as well, it also talks about people that have been corrupt and people that are implicated into the corrupt tenders. There's two tenders that I'd like to particularly speak about. First one is Yangena, second one is Sufambo. The Sufambo tender was meant to give us locomotives. If you comrades remember, in Cape Town, there was an incident where we received trains which were the specs were much more taller than it was supposed to be. So that's one of the things that we're talking about. How does a functioning department, according to what they say, how does a functioning department, a state-owned entity that's supposed to be catering for millions of people, not only in Cape Town, but across the country, including Joburg, how is it possible that they can buy or a train that's not fitting the rail tracks? It didn't make sense. So it's one of the reasons why we were able to dig down and come up with PRASA leaks. And then the second one, Siangena, was for coaches. So we were meant to get, if I can go back and quote, if I remember correctly, that was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. So the tender between PRASA, it was saying we need to have, I think 200, not 200. I might be wrong. But in the period of 10 years, we were supposed to get coaches. which we still waiting for even now. Yes, we're still waiting for them even now, which is one of the contributions and one of the reasons why we're sitting with a crisis in the Western Cape. So one thing that I also want to speak about is the casualties that are happening within the midst of everything. The corruption, maladministration, not having a proper board, or just people doing what they like at PRASA. It has straight implications or direct implications to commuters who are using these trains on daily basis. For now, as I said before, 5 weeks without any train in the Northern Line and in the Central Line. That is something huge for someone that's been using a train for all their lives, for someone that cannot afford to use a taxi, and for someone that is unemployed sometimes. That does not only have implications on those people, it also has implications on people that are not using a train. Because now you can imagine the long queues in taxi ranks, long queues in my city, and the long queues in Golden Arrow as well. So the fact that we don't have a train in Cape Town for these two lines, it has a direct impact, and it's one of the reasons why we wrote to actually give evidence, wrote to Parliament to give oral evidence and submissions yesterday. But unfortunately, as everyone might know, the board was not able to make it. And yesterday, even though they were given time to fly from Joburg to Cape Town, there was still no one who was able to come to Cape Town. So that says a lot about people who are holding accountable, people who we actually expecting to deliver services that are meant to help us. So personally, yesterday I was very disappointed, and I felt, even though on next week Tuesday we are still going to continue and have the same meeting, but personally I'm so disappointed, and it proves a lot of things about what was entailed in that derail report, which was written by Advocate Tulima Donsen. So another thing that I want to talk about, again, going back to the casualties, there is a court case which was, it's actually a judgment where that involves Metro Rail, PRASA, and Mr. Leslie van Minen. He stays in, where is this, not Mining, I forgot. But there was an incident where his son got stabbed. It happened in 2005. His son got stabbed, so he took Metro Rail to court. So during that time, PRASA and Metro Rail, both of them, if you go back to the judgment, they never complied with the Constitutional Court, which is the judgment of the 2004, which involved subsequent order of 2009 in Rail Commuter and Action Group and 54 others, and Transit Limited, Metro Rail. So as I said, that matter was brought forward, and even to date, they don't have a plan, a safety plan that guarantees that a person that takes a train from maybe Khayelitsha to town, the person or the commuter is going to be safe. There's going to be police visibility. There's going to be, people are going to be able to maybe press buttons, panic buttons in the trains if they feel that they're under threat. Within the PRASA as well, specifically in the Western Cape, we are faced with a lot of corruption, and personally it scares me, because we had a protest where we went to a meeting at PRASA uninvited, And I couldn't imagine I don't know how to put it, but I couldn't really imagine, because we went in and submitted the letter which we sent to the Minister of Transport. But then when we went out, we protested outside. And then the security and the guards of Metro Rail, they were so violent, trying to protect Mr. Mtura Swartz, because we were singing about him and saying he cannot be placed as the CEO of Rail Division because of his pending investigations, as well as investigations which include sexual harassment. So, in my own mind and how I see this PRASA crisis, is that it involves a lot of people, not only the people that are commuters, but only people that are employed by PRASA. If you remember, about 2 months ago, sometime in January, sometime in December, I think, there was 3 incidents where a commuter from, I think, Athlone, he was trying to escape from being robbed. Then he jumped from one carriage to another. Then he died. And then the second one was in Krisani, in Khayelitsha. Someone that works for PRASA, he had a weapon, like a gun on him. He was robbed. And then they used the same gun to shoot him. So that actually shows you, and with the evidence that I have, where it shows that Mtura Swartz, not only he has pending investigations, but he's also been employing people that are not skilled, are not registered with the security regulation, and people that are like just friends. So that put us in a lot of danger as commuters who are using PRASA. So just to close off, I want to talk about the campaign, or the upcoming campaigns that #UniteBehind will be having. The first one is what's happening on Tuesday. We're going to be having oral submissions in Parliament, where we're going to be having like an interaction with Mtura Swartz, also Cromwell Mulepo, including Richard Walker. So that's for us, that's an opportunity to actually ask these questions in person and understand what really is going on at PRASA, and understand when are we getting a proper board, when are we getting an emergency safety plan or an alternative transport, because had we had an alternative transport now, people will be able to use maybe a taxi or a bus, but everything is just stand still on the 2 lines, and no one seems to do anything about it. And just to close off, my main concern is that if the N2 in Cape Town was closed for 15 minutes, it would be a national crisis. Everyone would be talking about it. Everyone would be saying something about it, because it involves, or it's affecting a certain class, and at the same time it's affecting the ins and outs of Cape Town. So I'm surprised that no one is talking about PRASA, both no one seems to be concerned, if I may say, because for me it's very frustrating. It affects people that are supposed to be using these trains, people who have been using these trains for all these years. So it does have some classism, or some kind of, I don't know the proper word for it, but I can see the real impacts on ordinary people that are supposed to be using these trains. So thank you, that's it for me.
Thank you very much for sharing with us today, presenting your evidence. I just have a couple of questions which we'd be grateful if you could expand on in your experience and the work you do. You've mentioned one example of PRASA's conduct towards people who were expressing their grievances when you marched to the offices. Do you think that state-owned enterprises have a special obligation to listen and hear what citizens have to say? Is it a different obligation to maybe a private company? Or is that obligation with our politicians? Where should we look to solve these problems and challenges you've raised? Should we look to PRASA, or should we look to the ministers, to our president, to cabinet?
I think if we first start with the voting system here, proportional representation, it limits your right to say anything. So everyone, for me, the fact that I can put an X and I say this is the political party that I want to vote for, so whoever gets elected by that political party is accountable to me as a citizen. So that political party who has elected a president, that president who had an obligation to elect a cabinet, that cabinet is who's electing a committee, a parliamentary committee. Those are my people. That's what I believe. Those people should be accounting to me, regardless of which legislation does what. We're following the Constitution. So I need, as a citizen of this country who was elected, not necessarily elected, but who has voted for a political party, to elect someone that's going to be accountable to me as a citizen. I understand and I can see all these bodies, different bodies that are accounting, and parliamentary committees who are supposed to call different departments, different SOEs, departments. At the end of the day, it boils down to one thing: whose tax money is being used to run all this? So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Just one other question. You mentioned that what is going on in PRASA has impacts on a particular class, and that in your view there's underreporting of what is happening and the impacts of this. What do you think the role of the media is in this? What can be done to change it, and what does your organization do to try and spread awareness about the situation on the ground?
Firstly, what I think needs to happen from the media. In Cape Town, we don't only have one crisis, unfortunately. We have a water crisis as well. And there's a lot happening in that water crisis, and in between politicians and different organizations, which are, and different individuals. I can see a lot of popularism amongst. It's another conversation for another day. But what the media can do, or what my organization is currently doing, is we're currently writing letters and demanding answers. I'll come back to the media, and demanding answers from both the board of PRASA, Minister of Transport, as well as the committee who the board is supposed to be accounting to. And as I said, we've been having protests from last year, and the first big march that we had was on the 7th of August last year. It was to recall President Zuma. So that's the work that we've been doing as UniteBehind. So in terms of media, I don't see any commuters. I don't see any people going to taxi ranks, trying to find out how people with frustrations that people are having there, and try to cover that at least, because that is gonna go to the board of PRASA, and people will be able to express themselves, which is one of the reasons why when we went to speak to the committee yesterday, we had two commuters, people that are using or were using these trains, to actually give evidence as to the impact that the fact that the northern and the southern line is not working, the impact that it has on them personally. So that's one thing that I think the media can do, and they can write about what's happening. Because I know for a fact, fixing this, or trying to find solutions to this PRASA issue, or PRASA crisis, is not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's not impossible. I can make an example with India. India I can draw similarities between India and South Africa. Because South Africa, we've got metro rail, which is a metro, and then we have Shosholoza, which goes intercity. And then they've got a similar system in India, but theirs is much more better. If you talk about train delays, if you talk about train cancellations, they're close to none. If you talk about our communication, when the train is going to delay, when we're not going to have a train, they are close to none. And they do have, but it's not as bad as South Africa. Because obviously the population is not the same as South Africa and India. So they do have trains which are overcrowded, but that you would normally see that in the inner city, the interchange within the equivalent of Shosholoza in Cape Town, sorry, in South Africa. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not impossible. We can do it. And it's not something that we not us in this room, it's not something that could have not been prevented. We could have prevented what is happening at PRASA, and we can turn around. We can be able to change, can be able to make a difference. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's all the questions from the panel, and
Thank you
hand over
very
to the
much.
panel.
Colleagues?
Thank you very much, Zuki. As you know, this tribunal is focusing on economic crimes, and you have painted a picture of people who are unable to travel to work using the rail system in Cape Town. I just wanted to know from you the problems that are being faced by commuters. Would you attribute that to corrupt practices within the people who run the railway system? Would you say that these are happening because of corruption?
I can stand here and firmly say yes, based on the evidence that we have gathered as #UniteBehind. For an example, if we had, when I was growing up, I also used to use a train. So the length of a train, it used to be about 12 carriages. Now you would see a train that has about 4 to 5 carriages that's traveling from the CBD, Central Line, CBD to Khayelitsha. If you think about it, how many people do you think travel using that train? So if we didn't have people who are working within PRASA that are stealing these coaches and these railway lines, literally having a network of people saying this is where we're going to go and steal, we would never have that problem. That's one example. And then secondly, when PRASA signed a contract with Siyangena Technologies, which promised to install about 200 security systems, that contract was for 4.9 billion. And then if you ask me, has that happened? Do you see any security systems within PRASA? If something happens to you, can you go and ask them, can you show me footage? I've never seen that at PRASA. If that money was spent accordingly, if we as the state, not only PRASA, even the committee, the parliamentary committee, I feel that they have failed us by not telling PRASA or the board of PRASA to account. Because they have been calling them. This is not yesterday was not the first time that they've called the board and they didn't pitch. Now we want to know what's going to happen. What's the next step? They're not coming, so what's the next step? And they need to come and account. They need to come and tell us what's going on. Because we can't, what's happening now, it can't be happening. We need to have a stop. We need to stop somewhere and try to find out where did we go wrong. So, I'm not sure if that answers you.
All right, thank you, Zuki.
Thanks, Zuki. So just a quick question from me that I asked the previous witness as well. So we've heard during this tribunal about the linkages between private sector and public sector corruption. And I'm interested in your case and the work that you guys have done as UniteBehind. Are there any clear linkages that you can make to private sector actors in any of these cases that you have cited? Would you say that the corruption that's happening in PRASA that has resulted in very negative impacts on the lives of the poor largely, would you say that can be linked to any private sector actor that might have dealings with PRASA officials or anything to that effect?
Okay, let me just go back. I want to answer exactly what you're saying because I've got evidence right in front of me. So if you remember when I started speaking, I spoke about the ex-CEO of PRASA. His name was Lucky Montan. I want to go back and have, okay. So in 2015 August, as I said, we had the public protectors publishing a derailed report. And in her report, as I said, there were serious allegations of tender fraud, nepotism, corruption, conflict of interest that involved, obviously, Lucky Montan and others, not only him. So the public protector obviously had complaints, about 32 of them. In those complaints, he found that 19 of the 32 complaints were substantiated. So in 2014, Lucky Popomulefe came. Now the board was under his leadership. And then he could see that the linkage between who we're giving these tenders to and the members of the board, particularly him, Mr. Lucky Montan. So we do have like evidence to prove that he has been implicated in these dealings that were happening, corruption that is happening in PRASA, involving corrupt tenders which would allow him to get preference. For example, we know when we giving out, we're saying government has a tender, there's a certain specs, there's a certain criteria that a company needs to meet. So in some instances, you would find this criteria was meant for this specific organization or private entity, which was supposed to get this tender awarded, and then a board member or someone within the body of PRASA has certain interests, or actually is part of owning that company. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much for your evidence. I'm sure that it was very useful and it'll take the work of civil society forward, because you know that without a strong civil society, it is impossible to achieve the values of our Constitution. So thank you very much for that. Shall we adjourn until when? I believe that there is the next witness may be a little later than 1:45.
2:30.
Is it 2:30? Okay. Then we will adjourn until 2:30, or as soon as we are told that we are ready. Thank you very much.